Araham Aropite Abhipujayama Sadhuno Bhante Bhagava Suchira Varinim Bhutopi Vajima Janata Nukampamanasa Ime Sakare Dukatapana Karabhute Patiganatun Ahmakandi Garatam Hitaya Sukhaya Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi Swakatva Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami Namayang Buddhasa Bhagavato Upapākananakāraṁ Karomasare Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Before we start, I found that quote. So this is T.S. Eliot's The Dry Salvages. Men's curiosity searches past and future and clings to that dimension. But to apprehend the point of intersection of the timeless with time is an occupation for the saint. No occupation either, but something given and taken in a lifetime's death in love, ardor, and selflessness and self-surrender. For most of us, there is only the unattended moment, the moment in and out of time, the distraction fit lost in the shaft of sunlight, the wild thyme unseen, or the winter lightning, or the waterfall, or music heard so deeply that it is not heard at all, but you are the music while the music lasts. Anyway, be here now. It's nice. Beautiful. I won't get instruction. Let's just meditate for 45 minutes. I'll get up on the chair. And please.
Rama Chaloka Dipati Sahampati Katanjali Amati Varanaya Chata Santida Sata Paraja Kajatika Te Setu Taman Ankampiman Pajan.
Better wait for them to us. Waiting feels like this. Brilliant practice, isn't it? Anticipation feels like this. Let's go for it. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, read that again. That's a lifetime's contemplation. So T.S. Eliot from Dry Salvages. Men's curiosity searches past and future and clings to that dimension. But to apprehend the point of intersection of the timeless with time is an occupation for the saint. No occupation either, but something given and taken in a lifetime's death in love, ardor, and selflessness and self-surrender. For most of us, there is only the unattended moment, the moment in and out of time, the distraction fit, lost in a shaft of sunlight, the wild thyme unseen, or the winter lightning, or the waterfall, or music heard so deeply that it is not heard at all. But you are the music while the music lasts. Be here now. I think I'll for that line, I've contemplated that for decades. No occupation either, but something given and taken in a lifetime's death in love, ardor, and selflessness and self-surrender. I won't try to interpret that for you, but let me give you a response for someone who might have done that work. This is from Nisargadatta Maharaj. The main change was in the mind. It became motionless and silent, responding quickly, but not perpetuating the response. Spontaneity became a way of life. The real became natural, and the natural became real. And above all, infinite affection, love, dark and quiet, radiating in all directions, embracing all, making all interesting and beautiful, significant and auspicious. Wow. So that's T.S. Eliot challenges him. This is the response. And those kinds of readings, I never try to interpret them because they're very intuitive for me, and I'm certainly not there. But the main changes in the mind, it became motionless and silent, responding quickly but not perpetuating the response. Spontaneity became a way of life. The real became natural, and the natural became real. And above all, infinite affection, love, dark and quiet, radiating in all directions, embracing all, making all interesting and beautiful, significant and auspicious. So I better not say anything tonight after that. This is so beautiful, isn't it? It's so profoundly uplifting. I like that, responding quickly but not perpetuating the response. You know how we can respond quickly and then perpetuate the response for hours afterwards in some manner. Anyway, I think just reading something like that is something beyond intellect. It just, I think, strikes me at some level that, yeah, that sounds right. I'll aspire to that. And so, where should I go with this? So the word yesterday that I didn't like, purification. I was trying to figure out a better word for that, because that can somehow imply like someone is impure, but that's not really the implication. And so I was thinking of the word, we were talking about the word nirodha, cessation, and also upadana. So maybe I'll try to tie all these in. So let's see if we get these in. see what we come up with. We have heard and read about the deathless. Could you please reflect on rebirth? Because with birth, the cycle of unsatisfactoriness arises. Question? Much gratitude. And then a similar kind of, could you please reflect on any experience with contemplating non-rebirth? Same kind of question. Could you say anything about the quality of spaciousness as relates to awareness and perhaps as it relates to equanimity? If you want to throw that into, can you talk more about the qualities of awareness beyond being spacious, and does it have an essence? So let's say, first of all, upadana. So upadana means attachment. That's how it's translated in English. But it has a double meaning. And it's both attachment and fuel. Right? So it's like a fire that attachment just creates more fire. And then the teaching on desire, on the Four Noble Truths, is that there is suffering, it has a cause that causes attachment to desire, and then there is an end, there's a cessation to desire, and there's a path that leads to that cessation. So that third noble truth, there is a cessation to desire, is nirodha cessation. So then you have to really unpack the word desire, because there are wholesome desires and skillful desires, and there are unskillful desires. You have to remember that. If you take these things as like absolutes, that all desire is wrong, then it doesn't make any sense. So kind of, I think we get a sense of that. And then the way desire is described is there's the sense of becoming. So bhava, tanha is translated as craving. And it's always has a connotation of ignorance. There's other words like chaga, aspiration, which have connotations of wisdom. So there's a whole kind of linguistic thing there. But anyway, bhava tanha is the craving to become. And that's very rooted in a sense of self, becoming, going somewhere, doing something. And then vibhava is getting rid of repression, annihilation, not wanting to be this person. And then kama tanha is sensual desire, and that's just being absorbed in sense experience. So let's say you, when I was talking about purification, I was talking about my own social anxieties and fears and how I dealt with those. And if we go back to that, and I use the word purification, but perhaps cessation would be a better word. And in that case, so I'd have to give a Dharma talk to some first retreats or Chithurst or wherever, and then I would have fear. Fear would arise, and then, of course, with the fear, what arises is also the desire not to have the fear. Obviously, so it's not just fear; it's the whole package of my habits around fear, which are avoid people, which is one way to deal with it. But here I am now, I'm in front of people, what to do? And my teacher says, do it, you got to do it. I says, please, no. No, please. So I trust my teacher, I love my teacher. So then the struggle then, you'd think the struggle is around fear, wouldn't you? But it's not. The struggle is around the desire not to have the fear. And that's so very important, isn't it? Because the fear is not really my fault. It's just the conditioning habits of stream of consciousness, if we use that word again, that the stream of consciousness which is experienced by this individual has a habit tendency of fear in social situations. Why? Well, it might matter, but in this case it didn't really matter because it was conscious. So I didn't really have to figure out where it came from. I might have some ideas, but I never found that was all that helpful for me because it was conscious. If it wasn't conscious, well, that would be a whole other trip, wouldn't it? Then I'd have to see someone who could help me make it conscious. But because it was conscious, going back and trying to figure it out, I saw that, well, I'm just creating a self. I'm someone who has a fear problem. And Ajahn Sumedho said, no, don't go that direction. No fear as a conduct, no fear as a sankhara, as an experience, as a phenomenon. So this is where Buddhism is phenomenology rather than, say, sociology. So part of Buddhism is the social conventions and ethics that we live by. Part of it is phenomenology. It's the phenomena of fear that I'm observing now. And then the task is to understand, well, what's the cause of suffering? What's the fear? And no, back to the drawing board, right? It's if I didn't have this fear, I'd be happy. Yeah. We used to joke, if your grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bus. And here you are. That's the way it is. So that's the struggle, I think. First of all, identifying the craving around whatever the experience is. The experience comes up unbidden, doesn't it? I don't ask for it. Be it positive or negative. It comes up because that's its nature, the nature of conscious experience to change. So then I struggle with that, and my teachers and say, well, welcome it. And we have all that language now, right? And give it a cup of tea and let it sting. That's really good. Those are really, really good ideas. But you can know the theory, but then in practice, are you kidding me? So then I'd write talks down and my mind would go blank, and you've probably all done this too. So we all have maybe public speaking anxiety and things. But anyway, then it took me a while. I said, oh no, this is vipaka karma, this is resultant karma from whatever habits have been formed. And what's the second noble truth? So you keep going back to the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering. Yeah, this is not fun. This is horrible, actually. And second noble truth. So you have to make conscious that there is suffering. So if I was just thinking, well, I'm going to say this and I'm going to say that, and then I'll say this and then I'm going to say that, and my mind would go blank. I was suffering, but I wasn't conscious of it. I was just running with the language of suffering. So the first noble truth is let it become what is. So the way I like to talk about, like we say, body meditations, let the feelings in the knee become conscious. And the reason I use that, it's also around emotions. Let the feeling of fear or suffering, which generally, let it become conscious. So then there isn't a me trying to figure out what I'm going to do with it. And that's the first noble truth. So like the way Luang would said, it's that suffering has to be understood or stand under suffering. That's what Luang Sumedho describes it. So that's hard to do. And one would rather distract or whatever. So being sometimes just trapped with these things can be a very good thing. So for me, giving talks, I was trapped. So that then walking up and down, doing meditation and being nervous and what's the problem? What's the problem? What's the cause? What's the cause? And then I'd see, it's desire not to have this. That wasn't an easy insight, even though it's easy to say and everyone was saying it. It's so embedded in me, right? The way I'm dealing with that. So then, okay. And then I could see the logic of welcoming it. And then I could see the logic of what metta was in this case. It was allowing fear to be just as it was. And metta is a kind of allowing, isn't it? Oh, okay, now I get it. That's why awareness and metta are conjoined. But just being aware of fear, sometimes I was still trying to be aware of it in order for it to go away, right? And that's what we quite often do. We'll be aware of you if you drop dead. So it's not really, it's control or whatever. But I kind of, all right, if that's going to happen, please come. And then body awareness. So then in terms of upadana, what is attachment? And attachment is, first and foremost, it is the self-making around the particular experience, the I-making, my-making, the conceptualization of a me having to give a talk into the future. Time, self, thought. And that's a concept. The sense of self is a concept. It arises with conditions, and then it proliferates, and then those conditions arise again, it proliferates, and so then the sense of self is a habit. And something like, say, worry and fear, you can see how habitual it is. There goes the old worry wart again. Right? And so then it was the first, what we call Sakaya Ditti, the dismantling of this whole problem, is to see that very sense of personhood is a thought. And then that is a thought. And then you get behind the thought, you say, and it's like this, it feels like this. And so there's the sense of fear being a bodily felt thing, an emotion, and all the rest of it, and then the not wanting of it. If we don't dismantle that, what we call Sakaya Ditti, then it if you're I shouldn't be fearful, or why am I so fearful? That kind of analysis doesn't really, it's still Sakaya Ditti. Having said that, if someone isn't conscious of it, sure, then you have to do special work. But when it is conscious, then we try to see it as a phenomenon. And that's where we have the teaching in the five khandhas, anicca dukkha anatta, salayata, all the kind of phenomenological teaching that we have. So then patient endurance. Fear feels this way. Bodily awareness, and I kind of in bodily intelligence. So where is it? And I have to go to the toilet. There it is. Oh, this is a panic attack. Oh, okay. And just staying with the body and not going to thought. And that's a training. That's a training that has to be. And this is a very extreme thing, right? And then once you have something powerful and you get the insight, then you can apply it to other things which aren't so extreme, so powerful. So then the third noble truth is the cessation of desire. And I would say it's also becomes the cessation of this, the greed, hatred, delusion as well. So in my experience then, first of all, there had to be the non-attachment to the fear, to see fear as fear rather than be the person who is experiencing fear. And that's what we call Sakaya Ditti. And then noticing that, then I could see the desire to get rid of it. No, welcome it. So what's happening in stream of consciousness, this whole structure is being disarmed and deconstructed, or whatever language you want to use. It's being undermined. Whereas you can see the word upadana as both attachment and fuel. That makes sense, doesn't it? So I believe in the fear and I think fearful thoughts. I'm going to have more of the same next week, next day. So upadana is both that. But conversely, by witnessing it and not getting caught in the papancha, in the proliferation, witnessing it as a phenomenon that has a nature to cease, this will change, it will change, be patient, all that kind of language is right thinking. It's no longer thinking driven by a Sakaya Ditti or self-view, it's driven by wisdom. So we have the second part of the Noble. So we have the first part of the Noble Eightfold Path is right understanding. I'm standing under suffering. This is suffering. Yeah, it's true. That's right understanding. And then the second is right thought, sammasankappa. This will change. Endure, be patient, not self, whatever language you can get around it. And then the samadhi is just like sustaining that effort to, yeah, this feels like this feels like this. And then sure enough, the next time there is this need to, or next time social fear comes up, it's a little bit less. Certainly not over. It ain't that easy, at least not for me. But there's what? There is the, now there's the accumulation of goodness. So there is the lessening. So what I'm doing, I'm creating the causes and conditions for the lessening of fear in the future. But I'm also creating the causes and conditions for understanding and strength in the face of fear into the future. So there's both the positive and negative, cause and effect. So that's the thing we always ask ourselves. If I have some difficult suffering going on, what are the causes and conditions for that to lessen in the future? Rather than, oh gosh, I wish I didn't have that. And then what are cause and conditions which I can create to create more strength? So in this case, it was living within the boundaries of my life. I didn't run away from it. Honoring my teacher and so on. Understanding that suffering feels like this. Being mindful of suffering as a feeling, as a bodily feeling. Introducing language, just be patient, endure, it will change. You'll survive, they'll feed you later, don't worry. So you're putting all the language now, which isn't ego language. It's not judgmental language. It's just skillful thought. It's right thinking, samma sankappa. And right thinking is right attitude and right intention. I'm intending now to do this the next time, just the same way. Right? So then over the years, as it comes up, there you are. I haven't seen you. How you been? Really? That's later down the piece. And then all the time, you can see the causes and conditions for the future are lessening, because it's not any essential problem I have. It's just the way phenomenon have been sort of knocked together, and the cause and conditions for non-fear become stronger. More than that, then the causes and conditions for non-suffering become stronger. So then it becomes applicable to all forms of suffering because it's the same lesson. And the barami that's being built and the strengths that are being built are applicable to anger or just restlessness, or it's the same kind of structure. So it's not just about fear. And quite often, the really strong things that we have experienced are the great lessons in the building of spiritual qualities, wholesome qualities. So then there's the cessation of desire in any moment. So as soon as I see it as a khandha, as a sankhara, that's a cessation of desire right there. That welcoming of it, the metta bhavana to it, right there, that's cessation of desire. But that doesn't mean that desire ceased forever. It's in that circumstance it ceased. And then it might come up 4 seconds later. No. It's like this. That's what practice is. Weaving, carpentry, cooking, practice. And that's what we mean by practice. I've done it. Oh, okay. And you just keep doing it. So you build up what we call parami or virtuous qualities. And then that leads to the cessation of the fear itself. Because now the manifestation of fear is no longer repressed or indulged in, and it's not fueled, not attachment, letting go. Because it's not fueled, how can it arise in the future? Yeah, there still might be biological fear, right? So if I see a bear, I'm not going to say, may you be well and happy. I may. I mean, I probably will say that, but I'll do it at a distance. Thank you very much. But it's just biological fear. That's all right. It's just the way it is. And so you can see how there's this with the cessation of desire, there is the chance for. I was using the word purification. That's what I meant by it, that in stream of consciousness, these things fall away from the mind. But it's not nothing then, because the other qualities of presence and compassion and kindness and confidence begins to really grow. And the doubting mind, the intellectual doubting mind is very much challenged. Well, yeah, maybe you're doubting, but actually this worked, thank you. And you get this confidence which is from inside rather than from opinion, real confidence. And you get that in the craft, right? If you or you're good at something, you make something, you do something, same kind of thing. This works. It does work. So then what about rebirth? What's this all got to do with rebirth? We got a few minutes. So with the cessation of craving, there is a cessation of rebirth. So then what about the word rebirth and so on? Well, some people don't believe in rebirth. Some people believe in rebirth. Some people are agnostic. Some people are apparently clairvoyant. So they seem to have, some people have strong experiences which convince them that rebirth is something that is real. So you have various takes on that. And one of the ways to look at that is to just do it as a thought exercise. What if rebirth were true? What would that mean? Not as a thought exercise as what's the mechanism of rebirth, because basically we would have said if you try to figure that one out, you go crazy. It's just too complicated for the human mind. That's what we have in the texts. So you could do that as a thought exercise, which would mean that consciousness is not a physical phenomenon. So that's a thought exercise you could do. Do you think that consciousness is an epiphenomena of materiality, the body, or is it something else? So that's a kind of basic kind of question, and I can't answer it for you. So the other way, of course, of looking at rebirth, and in terms of rebirth, I think we've got it covered. We're okay because we're living good lives and we're good people. So if there is rebirth, I wouldn't worry about it, right? Some people ask, is the last moment of living, does that condition the next birth? And I say, well, seems a bit much. If you've lived a good life, you get annoyed at the nurse, she jabs you, you twit. Does that mean you're reborn in hell? Doesn't compute. Here you see, Chris is going to give me the last jab. So I think you've heard me, the analogy we asked Prapayutta, Tanchakun Prayutta, is a very well-loved and famous monk in Thailand. He said, well, it's like you have a corral horses and the rancher wants to open the corral gate and the horse that's closest to the corral gate, when the rancher opens it, they're all milling around, aren't they? They're not kind of taking a number, shooting up like at a deli. First, the one closest to the gate gets out, but then very quickly, the strongest horse dominates and leads the charge. And as an analogy, if rebirth is something that does take place, as an analogy, that kind of makes sense. Kind of momentum of your life makes sense. But the beauty of this is that you don't really have to believe in it. You can also look at rebirth as psychological rebirth, in the sense of self getting born through conditions. So in the fear example, fear comes up, and then the self view takes over. Oh, what am I going to say? Then I'm reborn as a Viradhammo, the fearful fellow. And then it's known, Sakkaya Ditthi is known. All fear feels this way. That's the end of rebirth, because the sense of self isn't reborn. Fear is just a fear, it's just a phenomenon. Then the question of the deathless, and then I have to go back and sort of explain why, the way I view this teaching and where I'm coming from in the model that I work with. So you have the early story of the Buddha's life, and you have almost a mythologized story. It's all prettied out, but basically the story of his renunciation is one where you've heard me tell the story, but it's important to understand where I'm coming from and why the deathless is important to me. So the Buddha becomes disillusioned with his own successful life, and he is taken out into the town by his charioteer. They had charioteers in those days. They didn't have Teslas. they didn't do CO2. And he goes out, and why we're saying we had a Tesla at the monastery the other day. All the monks were excited. We have some Elon Musk fans in the monastery. I'm okay, honest. So Channa takes him through the villages or whatever, and he sees a sick person. I'm really sick. really sick, like in their own vomit and racked with pain. And Siddhartha, his name was Siddhartha Zalema.
No.
You know, if you get a name like Siddhartha Zalema, you're going to be a monk. So Siddhartha sees the sick person and says, what is that? And China said, well, that's a sick person. We all get sick. So it's obviously a mythologized story, but it is something about youth not noticing sickness. You know, the kind of conceit of youth. You got the flu, but not me. I never get sick. But so there's this, you know, it's a kind of a narrative way of speaking to that in our minds, maybe, that doesn't see reality in that way until it happens. So he sees the sick person, and he's quite shocked by that. Wow, that's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to all my family. And then another day he goes out and he sees an old person, really old. And the description in text, I mean, this is very old, osteoporosis, death, bones, very thin. And he's shocked by that. And Shana says, yeah, that's an old person. We all get old if we don't die early. And that's, youth does that too, doesn't it? You old guys. I'm never going to be old. Fair enough, you know. And then the third day he goes out, he sees a corpse. A lot of people in our culture have never seen a corpse, because if you go to a funeral, they're treated up more beautiful than they were the day before. Sure, I've seen a bit of rouge there would be good. So when I was a layman, I was in one of the big cities in India. I saw a beggar had died on the streets, eyes open to the sun. Wow, it was a shock. So he sees corpse, and that really nails him. And he says, yeah, we all die. So it sounds, but you can see how the arising of that kind of spiritual fervor comes from those shocks of existential truths. And then the fourth day he goes out, and this is what's very important, is he sees a sadhu. He sees a mendicant. He sees a rishi, someone meditating, got some kind of yogi outfit on. Not the modern yogi outfits, no leotards thing. But he's got a robe on of some sort, rags, whatever, and he's in samadhi, and he sees that and says, Chana, what's that? He says, oh, he's a sadhu, he's a renunciant, he's seeking the deathless. So that's the clue for me, that he sees all this sickness and death, but and he contemplates deeply. He's a compassionate man. He says, well, we're all in this. Is there no way out? So that's the way he contemplates. Is this it? And then, because this does exist in Indian spirituality, this idea of the uncreated, the unconditioned, the unborn, the deathless, it's there in the culture all the time. And then he sees that, wow, I've got to do that. I've got to do that, not just for myself, but for my family and all my friends. And so he renounces home life, and 7 years later, he's 70. He's enlightened, goes back. His son becomes a monk. His wife becomes a nun, does she? Yes, I think she has attained. But anyway, the family gets decimated because they all want to become monks. So they finally ask him, monks and nuns, and finally ask him, could you please make sure these people get the parents' permission before they become monks and nuns? So from that day onwards, we have to get permission from our parents, no matter what age we are. So that's a side issue. So it's obviously a narrative about existential despair, but it's not just existentialism. I don't think Camus had a solution, did he? And Sartre went into communism, I think, from what I remember. So there is this kind of existential despair about our predicament. And I remember, he's a successful person. He's quite balanced God. Not God, I can't say that. He's a very balanced being. More than that, very gifted in many, many ways. So for me, the whole teaching somehow has to fall within that story. That's what makes sense to me, because that's his realization. There is the unconditioned, the unoriginated, the unborn. If there were not that, there would be no liberation from birth and death, from the round of birth and death. So he doesn't just attain to some kind of psychological balance of sort of worldly happiness. It's a truly spiritual realization, yes. And that's the way he couches it, or that's the way our texts say he couched it. I don't know, I wasn't there. So there is the uncreated, unoriginated, unborn, the deathless. And that language has always been very, very important to me, very important. And that language is more important than rebirth for me. I've never been interested in rebirth, in a kind of, so I say it's just sort of, be neat to know, but it seems to be like a red herring. If I'm interested in this, in the uncreated, the unborn, and yet it would make sense that language is used if there is rebirth. So that's my interest, but not in the context that I'm afraid of rebirth, because that would just be fear, more in the context of my own experiences of silence and stillness and love, which would kind of make sense to me. So everything then has to fall under that. So then how does he decide to teach? And he decides to teach the Four Noble Truths. And that's interesting, isn't it? But I think his first statement is, I am the fully awakened one, right? So he's realized, and he seeks out his own teachers. They have died, Alara Kalama and Udaka Ramaputta. They've died, and then he seeks out the 5 ascetics he was with. But he comes across another ascetic, and the ascetic says, and so are you. You're so radiant. He says, I'm the all-enlightened one, the all-knowing one. Good for you. And he walks on. So I think kind of modern translation of that, and that doesn't work. And you could see that could be a statement not of conceit, just that there is the knowing, and that kind of omniscience, not in terms of conceit. But anyway, so then he teaches the Four Noble Truths. Why? Well, logically, we all suffer. We're all there. So it's a beautiful entry for anyone to enter. And so then, in terms of the unconditioned, then I think this is the punchline here I'm getting to. In terms of the unconditioned, if my desire patterns are seeking conditions, then that has to be the wrong way of looking, if you see the logic of that. Because all conditions, all experiences, all phenomena have the nature to arise and cease, hence the importance of anicca. Now, the teaching doesn't say that everything is impermanent. That's a mistake. Teaching says that which has a nature to arise has a nature to cease. And that's a big distinction, because if everything was impermanent, then what about the Buddha's realization? So then the reflection to realize the unconditioned, you have to stop seeking the unconditioned in the conditioned. And that's what renunciation is about. It's not about shaving the head, although this is very comfortable, isn't it? I find I've been doing it for years. Very comfortable. But it's not about some outfit either, right? Or some meal regimen, or having cheese and chocolate, crazy meal that we have. But it's rather about not looking in the wrong place. That's what you kind of get it. It can't be that. And then you can certainly enjoy conditions. I enjoy comfort. I like the chair. And I enjoy the weather. There's nothing wrong with that. But you just realize, but that's not the unconditioned. Right? So without denying that and getting into some kind of horrible negative state of mind, you come more, okay, what is unconditioned? And that's the way the contemplative mind starts to work. What is unconditioned, uncreated? And you get to awareness. And these questions on awareness, well, could you describe awareness? No. Can taste itself? So awareness has no quality. It has no, like it's not sweet. Awareness knows sweet. It's not a song that you like. I could think. So it has no quality. It has no character. If it had a character or quality, then it would change, because all qualities and characteristics change. So you're left with this kind of mystery of, well, what is awareness? And that you can't get past, because if you get past that, then there will be something which be aware of. So awareness is not an object. It knows. So you start taking refuge in it. And that's what the idea of refuge is in Buddha, not as person, refuge in awareness itself, knowing. And then you add to that Dharma, this will change. So now the fear's coming up. I'm going to put it all together. Fear comes up. The desire is to not have the fear. And that's the seeking of some kind of objective experiences, emotional experiences, which will fulfill me. But the path is not about an experience. The path is about knowing experience is changing. Then I have the willingness, so I will bear witness to this fear because I'm interested in the unconditioned. And that is a great strength. That's how you get strength. When a strong condition starts to manifest in your mind, you say, yeah, but this is changing. It began, it will end. And I'm interested in the unconditioned. And keep coming back to that and getting better and better at that. So then cessation of desire, and I could just finish with Nisargadatta's statement on that. I thought it would be a good way to see how he talks about that. Nature is neither pleasant nor painful. It is all intelligence and beauty. That's a lot to take in itself. Pain and pleasure are in the mind. Change your scale of values and all will change. Pleasure and pain are mere disturbances of the senses. Treat them equally and there will be only bliss. And the world is what you make it. By all means, make it happy. Only contentment can make you happy. Desires fulfilled breed more desires. Keeping away from all desires and contentment in what comes by itself is a very fruitful state, a precondition to the state of fullness. Don't distrust its apparent sterility and emptiness. Believe me, it is the satisfaction of desires that breeds misery. Freedom from desires is bliss. What you need will come to you if you do not ask for what you do not need. Yet few people reach this state of complete dispassion and detachment. It is a very high state, the very threshold of liberation. If you try to apply this to war or starvation, then it doesn't work. Your mind revolts against that. So I was, it's in a context of refinement that we have. But on that line, you could send this to Apple. It is a satisfaction of desires that breeds misery. Now there's an Apple 13 or something, right? Yes, goes on. That's powerful, isn't it? That's very, very powerful. So, and that's one way of talking about Nirodha. Cessation of desire. So I'll leave that for your reflection.
Antamayang dhammo vadakatha sadhukarang dadamase sadhu sadhu sadhu
Page 44, you can finish, I think. Nope. 43. The suffusion with the divine abidings, the Brahmaviharas. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a heart imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a heart imbued with compassion, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a heart imbued with gladness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a heart imbued with equanimity, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. Closing homage. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi Vakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Upatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami